What is up, beautiful people? Today, I wanted to share some of the learnings that I gained from a book that I recently read called Win Fast. It's by an author named Siimon Reynolds. I started reading it and I struggled to put it down. I gained so much from it, so much so that I actually wrote quite a detailed article about all my learnings that you'll find in my newsletter. I've actually put the description somewhere you'll be able to find it, okay, somewhere a little related to this video. But I actually wanted to go through some really specific learnings that I thought you guys will find interesting. And it's this idea that you can do less and achieve more. Now, when you think about this concept, it's kind of countercultural, right? Like from a very young age, we are sort of conditioned to believe that the harder we work, the better and bigger results that we can have. And sometimes that's true, but that's not always the case. And he uses two principles to really illustrate this. The first one is the 64-4 rule. And the second one is this idea that there's like four fields of activity, and his suggestion that we should live as long as we can in field 4. So let's go through each of these. Let's go through the 64-4 rule first. So you may have already heard of the 80-20 rule. So this is the Pareto principle. This suggests that 20% of our inputs actually lead to 80% of our outputs. So another way of saying is like 20% of our efforts and time and energy leads to 80% of our results. Now, this is like a brain-breaking concept, but once you understand it, it can be life-changing. At least that's been my experience, right? So it's this idea that, let's say, for example, in happiness, there's probably 20% of activities that you do that contribute to 80% of your happiness. If you take the flip side, like say there's 20% of things that you do, or maybe people that you hang out with, for example, that contribute to 80% of your unhappiness. Or in the world of business, like say it's possible that 20% of your clients actually contribute to 80% of your revenue or your profit. So it's this idea that you have like a relatively small amount of input for a relatively high amount of output. And the concept is this, that there are certain activities that just yield disproportionate results. Sorry for my writing, guys. I am a doctor, so I can't like really turn that off. But the principle stands, right? So you have this idea that you have certain activities in your life that give you disproportionate results. Now, the 64-4 rule is the 80-20 rule on steroids. It's the 80-20 of the 80-20. So if you take the 80-20 and you take 80% of that, you get 64. You take 20% of 20 and you get 4. Now, this is the idea that 4% of your in is going to generate 64% of your out. Like, take a moment to truly understand what this is trying to say. It's essentially saying that you can either reduce or eliminate 96% of your current inactivities, and you would still get 64% of the results. This is one of the biggest opportunities, one of the most fundamental productivity strategies that I've come across and implement. I usually use the 80-20 principle, but the 80-20, but the 64-4 rule is next level, right? So it's this idea that you can actually spend less time on certain activities and get better results. Again, do less and achieve more, right? So if you are someone like most people who are like really busy and time poor and always kind of behind, this is really exciting because if you can figure out what your 4% activities are and you put more time and energy into that and you reduce or eliminate or like say delegate or automate the rest, then you will get disproportionate results. So once I read this, I was super excited. And I guess my next question was like, what are my 4% activities? At least, let's say professionally at the moment, let's say with my Dr. G work, what is my 4% activities? And that's where the fields of activity come into play. So there's oops, sorry. There's four fields of activity. The first field is the stuff that you kind of suck at and that you kind of hate. Like you'd rather not do it. For me, it's probably like, I don't know, like doing my tax returns or something. I find it really hard for some reason and I don't really enjoy it. Okay. Now the next thing is stuff that you're like, yeah, pretty good at. Not like super special, but you're good enough. Three is an interesting one. Like you're actually excellent at it. Above average, definitely above average. But you don't necessarily find it fulfilling. So, for example, I've been thinking about this a lot. Like maybe uh, I'll use a high school example. Like I was like pretty good at maths. Did I find it fulfilling? I'm not sure. I liked that I was good, but I didn't like. It was okay if I didn't do it, if that makes sense. And then field four activities are stuff that you're excellent at and you absolutely love. And what Simon suggests in his book is to spend as much time here. So after reading the book, I actually spent a few weeks contemplating like what are my field four activities, uh, at least for my Dr. G, like my professional work. And this is what I came up with. It's two things. It's learning, usually in the form of reading, and it's teaching those learnings, usually in the form of writing, coaching, and speaking. And the beautiful thing about this is when I learn stuff, usually to solve problems in my life, I love to teach it. And every time I teach it, it reinforces, strengthens my learnings, pokes holes in my learning so I can go back and learn some more and then teach some more and learn some more. So it creates this beautiful synergy. This is something I could do all day. I just love it so much. And the beautiful thing about this, right, is let's say I double the time I spend in field four activities every week. Like there is no downside. Like the worst case scenario is I learn a bunch of stuff and I help people by teaching it. Like that's the absolute worst case scenario. And this is stuff I like by definition I love. So it's like super energizing. Even if I'm tired at the start, if I do it, I actually feel more energetic by the end of it. So there's no downside. And there's like potentially like ridiculous upsides to it, right? Like say in the world of business, it might mean that I get to help more people or I meet some really cool people. Like there is literally no downside and like limitless upside. And the beautiful thing about this, like if we come back to this idea of doing less, of doing less and achieving more, in a world where we are all so busy, wouldn't it be nice to have a certain few activities that we can focus on that gives us disproportionate results? So we never have to sacrifice on the results in our life. We just have to choose wisely and take the time to choose wisely. So it's not so much about working hard, although that's important, but what you work on is more important. So when you blend the 64-4 rule with field 4 activities, I think if you do it for long enough, something beautiful really happen. And like I said, even if you don't get the results as such, there is literally no downside. You're doing what you love. You know, you can't lose. So if you are interested in high performance, if you are interested in essentially excelling in every area of your life, happiness, health, and high performance, I strongly recommend that you read this book, Win Fast by Siimon Reynolds. It's very easy to read, and it really delivers on his quite audacious promise, which is this idea that you can have uncommon levels of success uncommonly quickly. I am super grateful that Siimon took decades worth of his wisdom and experience and wrote a book about some of his winning strategies and shared it with the Dr. G's of the world. So I'm super grateful for Siimon. Get his book. I will have a link in the description. Like I said, my link for the article with more details on my learnings from this book are there as well. Until next time, much love to you and, of course, myself.